Nobody noticed Danny Reeves when he walked into the cafeteria on Galactic Station Horizon 7. He was just another human, small and soft compared to the dozens of alien species moving through the massive eating hall. He carried a worn leather bag over his shoulder and looked around with the nervous excitement of someone starting a new job. The cafeteria was nothing like the restaurant back on Earth. There were no kitchens, no cooking smells, no warmth. Just rows of machines that produced perfect gray cubes. Each cube contained exactly the right nutrients for whatever species needed to eat. Efficient, clean, completely without soul. Danny had been a chef on Earth for 15 years. His restaurant in Chicago had served comfort food, the kind of meals that made people close their eyes and remember their childhoods. But the restaurant closed when the building was sold, and Danny found himself looking for work anywhere he could find it. When he saw the job posting for a food service worker on a space station, he applied without thinking twice. Now he was here, watching aliens eat gray cubes and wondering what he had gotten himself into. A tall, thin being approached him. She had pale blue skin and eyes that seemed to look through him rather than at him. Her name tag read Shireen, and her title was Head of Nutritional Services. "You are the new human worker," she said. It was not a question. "Yes, that is me. Danny Reeves. I am a chef." Shireen tilted her head slightly. "Chef. This word means you thermally manipulate organic matter for consumption." Danny blinked. "I cook food, yes. We do not cook here. The molecular assemblers create nutritionally perfect meals for all species. Cooking is primitive and inefficient." She paused. "However, humans have requested thermal food preparation facilities. You will work in Species Section 12, serving the human population." Danny felt a small spark of hope. "There is a kitchen. There is a room. Your species demanded it when they first joined the station. No one has used it in 3 cycles." Shireen pointed to a far corner of the cafeteria. "That way. Storage Closet 7. Danny walked across the cafeteria, passing tables filled with beings he had never seen before. 4-armed giants with rough gray skin. Small furry creatures that ate in groups of 20. Beings made of what looked like living crystal. All of them eating the same gray cubes. He found the door marked Storage 7 and pushed it open. The room was small and covered in dust. But Danny saw something that made his heart jump. There were burners, a refrigeration unit, pots and pans hanging on the wall, untouched for years. Someone had brought real cooking equipment up here long ago, hoping to keep a piece of Earth alive in space. Danny set down his bag and pulled out a smaller pouch. Inside were containers of spices that his grandmother had given him before she died. Paprika, cumin, garlic powder, black pepper. The smell of them, even through the sealed containers, made him feel less alone that he spent the next 3 hours cleaning. He scrubbed the counters, checked the equipment, and made a list of everything he would need. The refrigeration unit still worked. The burners lit up blue and strong. This place could be a kitchen again. Around midday, a face appeared at his door. It belonged to a small alien with soft purple fur and large eyes that reflected the light. Her species was called the Bravari, Danny would later learn. But what caught his attention was her name tag. It read Pillow. "Hello," she said. "I am Pillow. I picked this name from human culture files." "What are you doing?" "I am cleaning this kitchen. I'm going to cook food here." Pillow stepped inside, her nose twitching. "Cook. This means making food with heat and mixing things together." "Yes." "What?" Danny stopped scrubbing and looked at her. Because food is not just about nutrients. Food is about taste, memory, comfort. When you eat something your grandmother made, you do not just feed your body, you feed your heart. Pillow was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "My people communicate through chemical signals. We can smell emotions. Right now, you smell like hope mixed with sadness. It is a very complicated smell." Danny smiled. "That sounds about right. I will help you clean," Pillow said. "I want to know more about this cooking thing." They worked together until the kitchen was ready. Danny looked around at the small space, now clean and waiting. Tomorrow, he would start cooking. He did not know if anyone would care. He did not know if anyone would even try his food, but he knew one thing for certain. This tiny kitchen in the corner of an alien cafeteria was going to change something. He could feel it in his bones, the same way his grandmother always knew when bread was ready to come out of the oven. Something was about to begin. The smell reached the ventilation system before Danny even finished cooking that he had spent 2 weeks preparing. Importing ingredient from Earth was expensive, but Danny had used most of his savings because he believed in what he was doing. Fresh beef, real vegetables, flour, and yeast for bread. The basics of comfort food that had fed humanity for thousands of years. Now, on a quiet afternoon when the cafeteria was half empty, Danny stood in his tiny kitchen and made his grandmother's beef stew. The meat went into the pot first, browning in real butter until the edges turned golden. Then came the onions, the carrots, the potatoes. The smell of cooking food began to spread. Danny added beef broth, herbs, and a touch of red wine. He covered the pot and let it simmer while he worked on the bread. Kneading dough was meditation for Danny. Push, fold, turn. Push, fold, turn. The rhythm calmed his mind and connected him to every baker who had ever lived. His grandmother taught him this when he was 7 years old, standing on a wooden stool to reach the counter. While the bread rose and the stew bubbled, something strange began to happen outside. Aliens were stopping, not to talk to each other or check their communication devices. They were stopping and lifting their heads, nostrils flaring or breathing tubes twitching or whatever they used to detect the air around them. The smell of cooking food was reaching parts of the station that had never experienced it before. Pillow appeared at the kitchen door, her purple fur standing up in excitement. Danny, something is happening. Beings are asking questions. They want to know what that smell is. Danny smiled and checked his bread. Tell them it is lunch. He loaded everything onto a tray, a large pot of stew and 2 loaves of bread still warm from the oven. Then he walked out into the cafeteria to find a table. He did not get far point if 4 massive aliens blocked his path. They were Gorthani, each one standing over 2 meters tall with gray rough skin and 4 muscular arms. They were known throughout the galaxy as traders and warriors, and they were not known for being friendly. Their leader looked down at Danny with eyes like black stones. His name was Brock, and he had shoulders wide enough to block a doorway. What is this? Brock asked, pointing at the pot. Beef stew, Danny said calmly. And bread. One of the other Gorthani leaned closer and sniffed. He pulled back with a look of disgust. This is dead animal water. You boiled a creature in a pot. We call it cooking. Brock reached down and grabbed one of the bread loaves. He held it up like evidence of a crime. And this? Yeast excretions? You eat fungus waste products. It is bread. Humans have made it for 10,000 years. The Gorthani laughed. It was a harsh sound, like rocks grinding together. Brock threw the bread on the ground and stepped on it, crushing it under his massive foot. Any species that still cooks their food clearly never evolved properly, Brock said. You are primitives playing at being civilized. Go back to your corner, little human, and eat your dead animal water alone. Danny looked at the crushed bread on the floor. He felt anger rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. Getting into a fight with 4 Gorthani would not help anyone. Instead, he bent down and picked up the ruined bread. He brushed off what he could and placed it back on his tray. That is all right, Danny said. I made plenty. He held out a spoon toward Brock, offering him a taste of the stew. Would you like to try some? You might be surprised. Brock slapped the spoon out of Danny's hand. It clattered across the floor, leaving a trail of brown broth. The Gorthani laughed again and walked away, shoving past other aliens as they went. Danny stood alone with his pot of stew and his crushed bread. The cafeteria had gone quiet. Every being in the room had watched what happened, and none of them had said a word. Then a small voice spoke from behind him. Human. Danny turned. An elderly alien stood there, hunched and frail with skin like cracked parchment. She was a Minari, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. Her people had given up cooking so long ago that they had lost the ability to taste. What is that smell? She whispered, her ancient eyes fixed on the pot in Danny's hands. Danny looked at her, at the hunger in her face that had nothing to do with nutrition. He smiled gently. Would you like to find out? The elderly Minari's name was Grandmother Shell, a rough translation of her title in her own language. She had lived for 300 years and eaten nothing but nutrition paste for 250 of them. She sat across from Danny at a small table in the corner of the cafeteria. Her thin hands shook as she held the spoon. Danny had given her a small bowl of the beef stew, and she stared at it like it might bite her. "I have not used this since in so long," she said quietly. "My people stopped cooking when I was young. We decided it was inefficient, wasteful. We engineered ourselves to need only paste." "What happened to the taste?" Danny asked. "We thought we removed it, but perhaps we only forgot how to use it." She lifted the spoon to her mouth and took a tiny sip. Her eyes went wide. The spoon fell from her hand and clattered against the bowl. For a long moment, she did not move, did not breathe. Then she began to cry. Not sad tears. Something deeper. Her thin body shook as memories she thought were lost forever came flooding back. She remembered her mother's kitchen. She remembered family meals around a table. She remembered warmth and laughter and the feeling of being loved through food. "I can taste it," she whispered. "After all these years, I can taste." Danny said nothing. He just sat with her while she cried, letting her experience something her species had denied themselves for generations. Word spread quietly after that. Pillow told her friends among the Bravari. They told others. A young Minari heard about Grandmother Shell's experience and came to see for himself. Then 2 more came, then a dozen. Within a week, Danny was cooking larger batches. He learned which species could safely eat which ingredients. Some aliens could not handle dairy. Others needed their food served at specific temperatures. A few could only eat things that were completely smooth, so Danny learned to make soups and purees. His tiny kitchen expanded. He took over the storage room next door, then the one after that. Pillow became his official assistant, her ability to smell emotions helping Danny understand what each customer truly needed. "This Gorthani smells angry, but also lonely," she would whisper. "Extra bread for him. That Minari smells like grief." Something soft and warm. The cafeteria began to change. Instead of beings rushing through to grab their nutrient cubes and leave, some started to linger. They sat together at tables, sharing meals and conversation. Species that had never spoken to each other found common ground over bowls of soup and plates of roasted vegetables. But not everyone was happy. Shireen watched all of this with growing concern. She spent her days analyzing efficiency reports and nutritional data, and what she saw disturbed her. The cafeteria's throughput was down by 15%. Beings were spending more time eating, which meant less time working. The clean, orderly system she had managed for decades was becoming something messy and unpredictable. She filed a complaint with station administration. "The humans' cooking methods pose potential health risks," she wrote. "Thermal food preparation introduces unknown variables. Cross-species ingredient mixing could cause allergic reactions. The entire operation lacks proper oversight and control." 2 days later, Danny found a notice stuck to his kitchen door. "Your cooking privileges are under review. Report to Administrative Hearing Room 7 in 3 days for evaluation. All thermal food preparation must cease until the review is complete." Danny read the notice twice, then carefully folded it and put it in his pocket. He had known this was coming. Change always frightened people, and Shireen had built her entire career on the old way of doing things. That evening, he told Pillow what had happened. "They cannot stop you," she said, her fur bristling with anger. "You have helped so many beings. You have given us something we did not know we needed." "They could do whatever they want," Danny said. "This is their station. I'm just a guest here. Then we will fight for you." Danny shook his head. "No fighting. That is not how food works. Food brings people together. It does not divide them." Pillow's ears drooped. "Then what do we do?" "I do not know yet, but I will figure something out." The next morning, Danny arrived at his kitchen before sunrise. He expected to find it empty and dark. Instead, he found a line of beings waiting outside his door. There were Minari and Bravari and species Danny had never even served before. There were even 2 young Gorthani standing awkwardly at the back, trying not to be noticed. "We heard about the review," Grandmother Shell said from the front of the line. "We came to tell you that whatever happens, you have already changed us." Danny looked at all of them, these aliens who had become his friends without him even realizing it. Something warm filled his chest, and he smiled. Well, he said, unlocking the kitchen door. I suppose I should make some breakfast then. We might need our strength. The hearing room was cold and sterile, designed to remove all emotion from whatever happened inside. White walls, white floor, white ceiling. A long table where 5 council members sat in identical chairs, their faces carefully blank. Danny stood alone at the center of the room. He wore his cleanest clothes and carried nothing but a small bag over his shoulder. Shireen stood on the opposite side, surrounded by screens displaying charts and graphs. She had prepared extensively for this moment. Her data was perfect, her arguments logical, her position unshakable. The human's cooking operation presents multiple risks to station safety. She began, her voice calm and precise. Thermal food preparation destroys up to 40% of available nutrients. Cross-species ingredient mixing has no standardized safety protocols. The time being spent eating cooked food reduces overall productivity by an estimated 12%. She pressed a button, and a new chart appeared. Furthermore, the emotional responses reported by beings who consume cooked food suggest a potential addictive quality. We are dealing with a substance that alters mood and behavior without any regulatory oversight. The council members nodded along with her presentation. Everything she said made perfect sense. Danny watched their faces and saw that they were already convinced. When Shireen finished, the head council member turned to Danny. Human Reeves, do you wish to respond? Danny stepped forward. I do not have charts or data. I have a request instead. I would like to demonstrate what I do. One meal. The council can taste it and decide if it has value. Shireen made a sharp sound of protest. This is highly irregular. The review should be based on evidence, not emotional manipulation. Food is not manipulation, Danny said quietly. Food is communication. Let me show you what I mean. The council members looked at each other. After a moment, the head member nodded. Permission granted. You have 1 hour. Danny opened his bag and began to work. He had brought everything he needed. A portable burner, a small pot, ingredients sealed in containers. He had known from the beginning that words would not save him. Only food could do that. He made his grandmother's Sunday dinner. The meal she had prepared every week for 40 years. The one that brought the whole family together, no matter how busy or scattered they were. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, gravy, green beans, apple pea, he cooked, he talked. My grandmother grew up poor, he said, his hands moving without thinking, following patterns learned in childhood. Her family did not have much, but every Sunday she made this meal. Not because it was efficient, not because it was the best use of resources. She made it because it was how she told her family she loved them. The smell filled the hearing room. The council members shifted in their seats. Even Shireen seemed affected, though she tried to hide it. Humans do not just eat for nutrition, Danny continued. We eat for memory, for comfort, for connection. When I taste this chicken, I am 7 years old again, sitting at my grandmother's table. I am surrounded by people who love me. I am home. He finished plating the food and carried it to the council table. Each member received a small portion of everything. They looked at the plates like they contained something dangerous. Then Danny turned and walked to the back of the room where the audience sat. He had not noticed until now, but the room had filled with beings, Minari and Bravari, and even some Palori. And there, standing in the back corner with his arms crossed, was Brock the Gorthani. Danny walked directly to him and held out a plate. You said my food was for primitives, Danny said. Prove me wrong. Taste it and tell me I am primitive. Brock stared at Danny for a long moment. The room went completely silent. Everyone knew what Brock had done, how he had humiliated Danny and destroyed his bread. No one expected him to accept. But Brock reached out and took the plate. He picked up a piece of chicken with his massive fingers and put it in his mouth. His jaw moved slowly as he chewed. His black stone eyes seemed to look at something far away, something only he could see. I remember this, he said, his voice strange and distant. My clan father, before we joined the Galactic Union, before we learned to be civilized. He looked down at the plate in his hands. He cooked meat over fire. He said it was how our ancestors honored the animals they hunted. I had forgotten until now. Brock raised his head and looked at Shireen. His voice was no longer mocking. It was raw with something that might have been pain or might have been joy. This review is over. The human stays. The council members looked at each other. The head member cleared her throat. The council will deliberate and announce our decision tomorrow. But everyone in the room already knew the answer. 3 months had passed since the hearing, and Galactic Station Horizon 7 was no longer the same place. Danny's small kitchen had grown into a full restaurant that took up an entire section of the cafeteria. But that was not the biggest change. The biggest change was that Danny was no longer the only one cooking. It started with the Gorthani. Brock returned to Danny's kitchen the day after the hearing, embarrassed and awkward. He stood in the doorway, too big to fit through without ducking, and asked if Danny could teach him how to grill meat. My people used to be hunters, Brock explained. We cooked our kills over open flames. It was sacred to us. But when we joined galactic civilization, we were told it was primitive. We stopped. We forgot. Danny gave him an apron and showed him how to control the heat. Within a week, Brock had opened his own grilling station. Other Gorthani joined him, rediscovering techniques their great-grandparents had used. The smell of roasting meat became a permanent feature of the cafeteria, and the Gorthani who gathered around the flames began telling old stories they had not shared in generations. The Bravari found their own path. Pillow discovered that fermented foods produced complex chemical signatures that her people could sense like music. She started experimenting with pickles, yogurt, and sourdough. Soon, Bravari were hosting feeling meals where they would gather to experience the emotional chemicals together. Even some Palori began to change. A young one named Quiet approached Danny one day and asked a question that surprised him. Can food be beautiful without being nutritious? Danny thought about it. Yes, sometimes we make food just to look at it, just to enjoy the shapes and colors. Quiet's eyes lit up. She began creating geometric food sculptures, precise and elegant and utterly useless from a nutritional standpoint. Other Palori came to watch her work, fascinated by something they could not quite name. The cafeteria became the heart of the station. Species that had ignored each other for years now sat together, sharing recipes and stories. A Minari poet wrote an epic called The Human Who Taught Us to Taste, and it was performed to standing room crowds. Young beings from across the station applied to work in Danny's kitchen, wanted to learn the craft that had brought so many together, but not everyone was happy. Shireen watched all of this from the old section of the cafeteria, the only part that still served nutrient cubes. She had lost the hearing, but not her position, and she continued to manage the molecular assemblers with perfect efficiency. Almost no one used them anymore. She filed one final complaint with the station council. The human has culturally contaminated this station, she wrote. He has undermined centuries of nutritional progress. He has introduced chaos and inefficiency into a system that was working perfectly. I request a full review of his influence and a plan to restore proper order. The council agreed to hear her case. Danny would have to defend not just his cooking, but the entire movement he had created. Pillow brought in the news, her fur flat with worry. They're going to try to stop everything. Shireen wants it all shut down. Danny read the summons carefully. The hearing is in 1 week. What are you going to do? I do not know yet. He folded the paper and put it in his pocket. But first, I need to do something. That night, after the cafeteria closed and the lights dimmed, Danny walked through the empty halls. He passed the Gorthani grilling station, now cold and quiet. He passed Pillow's fermentation corner. He passed all the little spaces where beings had found something they did not know they were missing. He found Shireen sitting alone in the original cafeteria section, surrounded by gleaming machines that no one used anymore. She was not eating. She was just sitting there, staring at nothing. Danny pulled out a chair and sat across from her. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Then Danny reached into his bag and placed a small container on the table between them. Inside was a simple dish, plain rice with a fried egg on top, drizzled with a little soy sauce. My grandmother made this for me when I was sad, he said quietly. It never fixed anything, but it helped. Shireen looked at the food, then at Danny. Her face was impossible to read. Why are you here? She asked. Because I think I understand something I did not understand before. And I think maybe you need someone to listen. The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of conflict. Finally, Shireen spoke. You want to hear my story? Yes, Danny said. I really do. Shireen's voice was soft when she finally began to speak. The Palori did not always eat nutrient cubes. Long ago, we cooked like everyone else. We had family recipes passed down through generations. We had meals that meant something. She paused, her pale blue fingers tracing patterns on the table. Then the Great Famine came. A disease destroyed our crops. A blight killed our animals. For 3 generations, my people starved. Millions died. Children watched their parents waste away. Parents buried their children. Danny said nothing. He just listened. When we finally developed synthetic nutrition, we swore we would never be vulnerable again. Food had betrayed us. Food had killed us. So we decided to remove it from our lives completely. Cooking became associated with death. Efficiency became survival. She looked at Danny, and for the first time, he saw something other than coldness in her eyes. He saw pain that had been buried for centuries. I grew up being told that cooking was dangerous, that wanting to taste things was a weakness, that the old ways killed our ancestors. Her voice cracked slightly. I believed it. I still believe it. Danny pushed the container closer to her. You survived the famine. Your people survived. But Shireen, you do not have to keep surviving it forever. Shireen stared at the rice and egg. Her hands trembled. I do not know how to stop. You do not have to know, Danny said gently. You just have to take one bite. The council hearing took place 3 days later. The room was packed with beings from every species on the station. Shireen stood on one side. Danny stood on the other. But something had changed between them that night in the empty cafeteria, and everyone could feel it. Danny did not defend himself. Instead, he let others speak. The Gorthani spoke about how shared meals had reduced fights between trading groups by 60%. When you eat together, they explained, it is harder to see others as enemies. The Minari spoke about recovered cultural memories. The taste of cooked food had unlocked stories and traditions they thought were lost forever. Grandmother Shell herself stood before the council and recited a poem her mother had taught her, one she had not remembered until she tasted Danny's stew. Pillow spoke about the Bravari-feeling meals, how cooking had given her people a new way to connect with each other and with other species. The chemical signatures of shared food created bonds that words could not express. Even Brock spoke, the massive Gorthani who had once crushed Danny's bread under his foot. He told the council about his clan father's fire, about the traditions his people had abandoned. He said that Danny had given him back a piece of himself he did not know was missing. When all the testimony was finished, the council turned to Shireen. You requested this hearing, the head member said. What is your final statement? Shireen stood silent for a long moment. Everyone waited. The human's food is inefficient, she said slowly. It is illogical. It serves no measurable nutritional purpose beyond what our assemblers provide. The room tensed. However, Shireen's voice changed. I have recently learned that efficiency is not the only measure of value, and that some wounds cannot be healed with logic. She turned to look at Danny. Something passed between them, an understanding that had been built over rice and egg and a late-night conversation. I withdraw my complaint, and I would like to request something from the human. What is that? The council head asked. Cooking lessons. The room erupted. Beings cheered and clapped, and made sounds Danny had never heard before. Pillow jumped up and down, her purple fur wild with excitement. Even the council members smiled. 6 months later, the cafeteria on Galactic Station Horizon 7 had become famous across 3 sectors. Ships changed their routes just to stop and experience it. Food critics from distant worlds wrote articles about the human who had started a revolution with a pot of beef stew. But Danny's favorite moment was still the quiet mornings. Every day before the cafeteria opened, he stood in his kitchen with Shireen at his side. He taught her how to make simple things. Rice and egg, toast with butter, soup from scratch. She was not very good at it. Her hands moved with mechanical precision that worked against the intuitive nature of cooking. She still measured everything exactly, still worried about efficiency, still tensed up when things did not go according to plan. but she kept trying. Every single morning, on this particular morning, Shireen finished her rice and egg and sat down to taste it. She chewed slowly, her eyes closed. "It is warm," she said. Danny smiled. "Yes, it is." She said it every morning now, not as a complaint or an observation. She said it as if the warmth itself was precious, as if feeling something, anything, was a gift she was still learning to accept. Outside the kitchen, the cafeteria began to fill with beings from 100 different worlds. They came to eat, but they stayed for something more. They stayed for the connection, the community, the simple magic of sharing a meal with others. Danny Reeves, the human chef from Chicago, watched it all with quiet satisfaction. He had come to this station with nothing but a bag of spices and his grandmother's recipes. He had been mocked and dismissed and nearly sent home. But now the cafeteria belonged to him. Not because he owned it, not because he controlled it, but because he had filled it with something that could not be measured or quantified. He had filled it with love. One meal at a time.